He didn't come to the forest to find anything, just a place to rest. But his dog stopped and refused to take another step forward. In the silence between the trees, something unseen was already watching them. A hidden aircraft, a forgotten signal, and a warning that came too late. The deeper he went, the more the past began to feel unfinished. And this time, walking away would mean losing something he couldn't afford to lose again. Where are you watching from today? Like, subscribe and stay with us for the full story. Rowan Hale and Cairo did not live. They moved. Not in the romantic sense people like to imagine, not with open roads and freedom stitched into the horizon. They moved the way a man steps out of a room that still smells like something he can't forget. Quietly. Without explanation. Without looking back too long. Rowan was 43. Built like a man who had spent too many years learning how to survive things most people never saw. He stood just over 6 feet, broad-shouldered, his body dense with muscle that came from function, not vanity. His face was angular, the kind that carried decisions long after they were made. A rough line of stubble traced his jaw, never fully shaved, never allowed to grow. His eyes were blue-gray, steady and distant, like storm water held behind steel. His dark brown hair was cut short in a practical military style, already touched with early silver at the temples. It made him look older in certain light, not weaker, just more finished, like a man who had already spent the best parts of himself somewhere else. He wore the same thing he always wore, an olive field jacket hung open over a red and dark blue plaid shirt softened by years of use. Dark cargo pants carried the weight of habit. His brown leather boots were worn at the toes, marked by places that no longer had names attached to them. A scratched military watch circled his wrist, still ticking, always ticking. A folding knife rested inside his jacket. And his Eberly stock half-track backpack leaned against the passenger seat like a silent partner that never asked questions. Beside him, Cairo moved like something that didn't belong entirely to the present. The German shepherd was 5, maybe 6, with a black and tan coat that caught the morning light in muted bronze. His build was balanced, lean muscle, quick reflexes, a body shaped for precision rather than brute force. His eyes were deep and focused, always reading the world as if it spoke in layers no human could fully hear. He wore a black tactical harness, clean but worn, marked with a simple patch. K9 Cairo. Cairo didn't bark much. He didn't need to. That morning the forest welcomed them with quiet beauty. Tall pines rose like pillars into the sky, their needles filtering sunlight into soft gold that draped across the moss-covered ground. The air was cool, clean, touched with the faint scent of damp earth and resin. Somewhere far off, water moved over stone in a steady, patient rhythm. Rowan parked the truck in a small clearing and shut off the engine. Silence followed. Not empty silence, the kind that watched back. He stepped out, boots pressing into soft moss, and stretched his shoulders slightly beneath the weight of his jacket. For a moment, nothing felt wrong. Then Cairo didn't move. Rowan noticed it immediately. The dog stood beside the truck, one paw slightly forward, head lifted just a fraction higher than usual. His ears angled toward something unseen, his nose testing the air in slow, deliberate pulls. Not alert, not relaxed. Something in between. "What is it?" Rowan asked quietly. Cairo didn't look at him. He took a few slow steps forward, then stopped. Rowan frowned slightly. That wasn't normal. Cairo was trained to signal clearly, Forward meant safe, blocking meant danger, circling meant uncertainty. But this was different. Slower, heavier, as if the dog wasn't reacting to something new, but something familiar. Cairo moved again. Step, pause, head lifted, listening. Then stillness. Rowan felt something tighten in his chest. It wasn't fear, it was recognition of a pattern he couldn't yet define. "All right," he murmured. He followed. They moved deeper into the forest, away from the truck, into a space where the trees grew thicker and the light became more filtered, more selective. The ground sloped gradually upward, roots twisting through moss like veins beneath skin. Cairo kept stopping, each time longer than before, each time more certain of the direction. Rowan didn't question it. He had learned long ago that Cairo's instincts weren't guesses. They were decisions made faster than thought. After 20 minutes, the trees began to thin. The air shifted. Not colder, not darker, just wrong. Rowan stepped out from between two pines and saw it. The airplane. It sat at the edge of a cliff like it had always belonged there. Not broken, not destroyed, not scattered like wreckage. It was intact enough to feel intentional. The fuselage leaned forward slightly, caught between rock and root. Its metal skin weathered, but not torn apart. One wing was partially collapsed, but the body of the aircraft remained unnervingly whole. Moss and vines had begun their slow claim, but not enough to erase its shape. It looked less like a crash, more like a placement. Rowan stopped walking. His mind tried to make sense of it. Failed. "That's not," he began quietly. But there was no word that finished the thought. Behind him, Cairo didn't move. Rowan turned slightly. The dog stood several feet back now, not advancing, not retreating, just refusing. That was new. Cairo always stayed close. Always. Rowan studied him. "You coming?" Nothing. The dog's eyes remained fixed on the plane, not afraid, but opposed. Rowan felt the warning settle in, clear, direct, unmistakable, and still. He turned back toward the aircraft and took a step forward. Then another. The metal skin of the plane was colder than it should have been under the morning sun. Rowan ran his hand along the surface, feeling the roughness of corrosion beneath his fingertips. The texture told a story of years exposed to the elements, but not destruction. This thing had endured. He moved closer to the cockpit. The glass was cracked, but still in place. Inside, he could see fragments of the instrument panel, wires hanging loose but not completely torn apart. No signs of fire. No signs of violent impact. Wrong. Everything about it was wrong. He crouched slightly, examining the lower section of the fuselage. That's when he felt it. A subtle difference in the metal beneath his hand. Smoother, disturbed, as if something had been touched more recently than the rest. Rowan leaned in, narrowing his eyes. A faint line, almost invisible. A seam. Behind him, Cairo stepped forward, then stopped abruptly. Not gradually, not uncertainly. He stopped like something had drawn a line in front of him. One step short of Rowan, one step short of the plane. The dog's body stiffened, not in aggression, not in fear, in refusal. For the first time since Rowan had known him, Cairo chose distance, not from the forest, not from danger, from Rowan. Rowan didn't turn immediately. He felt it instead. The absence, the space where Cairo should have been. That hit harder than any visible threat. Slowly, He looked back. Cairo's eyes met his. Steady, unmoving, clear. This was wrong. Rowan held that gaze for a long second, then exhaled quietly. "Yeah," he muttered. "I know." But knowing didn't change what came next. He turned back to the seam. Curiosity had already taken hold, and curiosity, in men like Rowan Hale, rarely let go once it found something that didn't fit. He brushed the surface lightly. Dust flaked away. The line became clearer. A panel, hidden in plain sight. Not part of the original design. Modified. That realization settled into his bones. Someone had been here. Not long ago. Not recently enough to leave fresh marks. But not long enough for time to erase intention. Rowan straightened slowly. The forest remained quiet behind him. Too quiet. He scanned the cliff edge, the tree line, the sky. Nothing moved. No sound. No sign of anyone. And yet, the place didn't feel empty. Cairo shifted slightly behind him. Still not coming closer. Still watching. Rowan looked back once more. The dog hadn't moved an inch. But his posture had changed. More rigid, more focused. As if waiting for Rowan to make a decision or a mistake. Rowan turned back to the plane. His jaw tightened. There were moments in a man's life that didn't announce themselves. No warning. No signal. Just a quiet shift between what he knew he should do and what he was about to do anyway. He stepped closer. Close enough now to see the edge of the panel clearly. Close enough to reach it. His hand lifted, paused. Just for a second. Long enough to feel the weight of choice. Then he pressed his fingers against the seam and pushed. Nothing happened. No sound, no movement, just resistance. Old, stubborn, untouched for years. Or waiting. Rowan leaned in slightly, applying more pressure. Still nothing. He exhaled slowly, pulling his hand back. "Not that easy," he murmured. Behind him, Cairo let out a low, almost inaudible sound. Not a growl. Not a warning. Something softer. Something heavier. Rowan stood there for a long moment, staring at the hidden panel, the silent plane, the impossible way it sat on the cliff as if it had been placed there by hands that didn't care whether it made sense. Then he stepped back, not retreating, just delaying. For now. The forest breathed around them, light shifting, wind moving, time continuing as if nothing had changed. But Rowan knew better. He had seen enough strange things in his life to recognize the feeling settling into his chest now. This wasn't just a place. It was a beginning. And somewhere between instinct and decision, he had already crossed into it. Rowan didn't open the panel. Not yet. He stood in front of the aircraft for a long moment. The faint seam still visible beneath the morning light, his hand hovering just enough to remind himself that he could open it. But choosing not to. That mattered. Choice always mattered. Behind him, Cairo shifted. Not closer, not farther. Just enough to remind Rowan that the dog was still there, and still not willing to step into the same space. Rowan exhaled slowly, letting the breath settle his thoughts. "All right," he murmured. "If it's wrong, it'll show itself." He stepped away from the panel. That alone changed something. The tension didn't disappear, but it moved. Like a current adjusting direction instead of breaking. Rowan turned his attention outward, forcing himself to do what he had been trained to do long before curiosity had started making decisions for him. He widened the search. The ground around the aircraft told a quieter story. At first glance, it looked untouched. Moss spread thick across stone, pine needles layered in soft decay, small plants reclaiming space inch by inch. But when Rowan slowed his pace, when he let his eyes soften instead of sharpen, the differences began to surface. Subtle disturbances, compressed moss, a broken twig that hadn't weathered long enough to belong to last season. He crouched low. There, a footprint, faint, half erased, but human. Rowan studied it carefully. The shape was incomplete, the edges blurred, but the depth was wrong for an animal. Too even, too deliberate, heel to toe, with weight distributed in a way that came from habit, not instinct. One person, not running, not struggling, walking. That mattered more than anything. "Someone's been here," Rowan said quietly. Cairo moved closer now, but not toward the plain, toward the ground. The dog lowered his head, inhaled once, then again. His ears flicked slightly, adjusting to information Rowan couldn't access. Then Cairo did something unexpected. He didn't follow the footprint. He turned away from it. Rowan frowned. "That's not it?" Cairo paused, then walked in a different direction. Slow, deliberate, certain, Rowan followed. They moved along the side of the aircraft, toward the section where the fuselage curved downward into shadow. The metal there was darker, less exposed to sunlight, and the moss had taken stronger hold. Cairo stopped. Not abruptly, not in warning, but with intention. He lowered his head near a section of the plane where part of the outer skin had been removed. Not torn, removed. That was the difference. Rowan stepped closer. The edges of the opening were clean, too clean, not jagged from impact, not worn from time. Someone had taken this panel off, carefully, and not that long ago. Rowan crouched beside it, his fingers brushing lightly along the metal edge. Cold, smooth in places, recently disturbed. He leaned in. Inside the opening, the structure of the plane revealed itself in layers. Metal ribs, wiring channels, hollow space where insulation had once been. Dust lingered, but it wasn't settled evenly. Something had moved here, more than once. Cairo made a soft sound. Rowan glanced at him. The dog wasn't tense. He wasn't aggressive. But his focus had narrowed. Laser sharp, locked onto something inside. Rowan followed that line of attention and saw it. Scratches, not random, not from animals, metal against metal, repeated, intentional. They formed a pattern, not symmetrical, not clean, but deliberate in their repetition. Rowan leaned closer, angling his body to catch the light. That's when the pattern shifted into meaning. Letters, hand-carved, dragged into the metal with something sharp, something hard, something that had required time. He wiped away a thin layer of dust. The words became clear. "Don't be late." Rowan froze. His breath stopped halfway in his chest. For a moment the forest disappeared. The cliff, the plain, the light. All of it fell away, and he was somewhere else. Hot air, dust, the smell of oil and metal, and something burning in the distance. A voice, not loud, not urgent, just tired. Don't be late. He had been. Rowan blinked once, hard, forcing the memory back into whatever place he kept it buried. The forest returned. The plane returned. The words stayed. He stared at them. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I remember." Cairo stepped closer. Closer than he had been since they reached the plane. The dog lowered his head, nose hovering just inches from the carved letters. He didn't sniff aggressively. He didn't paw. He simply stayed. Rowan watched him. "Something about this feels familiar to you too, doesn't it?" Cairo didn't answer, but he didn't move away either. That was enough. Rowan leaned back slightly, his mind beginning to work again. This wasn't just a wreck. This wasn't just a strange placement. Someone had been here. Someone had opened the plane. Someone had carved those words. And not as decoration, as a message. But for who? Rowan's eyes shifted across the interior again. The wiring. That caught his attention next, because it didn't match. The plane was old, older than most systems still in use. But parts of the wiring didn't belong to that era. Some cables were newer, cleaner, less corroded, replaced or added. He reached out and traced one line carefully. It led deeper into the structure, not toward the cockpit, not toward any original system, toward something else, hidden. "All right," Rowan murmured. "That's new." Cairo shifted beside him. This time the movement was different. Less resistance, more alignment. Rowan noticed. And that made him uneasy. Because Cairo wasn't calming down. He was adjusting, adapting, accepting. And Rowan wasn't sure that was better. Cairo leaned in, gently, almost carefully, and placed his paw against the carved words, not stepping on them, not covering them, touching them. The dog's body went still, completely still. His breathing slowed, his ears angled forward, his eyes lifted, not to Rowan, but past him, as if for a brief second, Cairo was listening to something that wasn't there anymore, but hadn't fully left either. Rowan felt it then. Not fear, not danger, something heavier, a presence made of absence. Cairo pulled his paw back, just as quietly as he had placed it. The moment ended. The forest returned to itself. Wind through pine, light across moss, the steady, indifferent rhythm of a world that didn't care what had been carved into metal. Rowan swallowed once. "That wasn't normal," he said. Cairo sat, calm but alert. Rowan shifted his weight, standing slowly. His eyes moved back to the wiring, then to the scratches, then to the opening in the plane. Everything connected. Not clearly, not completely, but enough. Someone had used this place, not long ago, not randomly, and they had left something behind, not just physically, something that lingered. Rowan stepped back from the opening. For the first time since arriving, he didn't feel pulled forward. He felt watched. Not by eyes, by consequence. He turned his gaze toward the forest. Nothing moved. No sound broke the stillness. But the silence had changed. It felt tighter now, more aware. Rowan looked down at Cairo. The dog met his eyes. No hesitation, no confusion. Just that same steady intelligence that had kept both of them alive more than once. Rowan exhaled slowly. "We walk away now," he said. It wasn't a question. Cairo stood immediately, no resistance, no delay. They moved back toward the trees together. But Rowan didn't feel relief. Because as they stepped away from the plane, one thought stayed with him. Clear, unshakable. He had seen those words before. He had heard that sentence before. And the last time someone hadn't made it. The forest closed around them again, light filtering through branches. The world returning to something that looked ordinary from a distance. But Rowan Hale knew better. He had stepped into something unfinished. And whether he stayed or left, it had already started. Rowan didn't go far. He and Cairo moved back into the trees, away from the cliff and the plain, but not far enough to forget where it was. The forest closed around them again, sunlight filtering through branches, soft and calm, almost too calm for what Rowan now knew lay behind it. He stopped near a fallen log, the bark stripped away by time, pale wood exposed like bone beneath skin. Cairo circled once and sat, but not fully at ease. His posture was upright, alert, not scanning for immediate danger, but listening for something that hadn't finished speaking. Rowan set his pack down. For a few minutes, neither of them did anything. No movement, no conversation. Just the sound of wind threading through the trees and the quiet, distant rhythm of water somewhere below the ridge. Rowan rubbed a hand over his face, rough stubble scraping against his palm. "All right," he said softly. He wasn't talking to Cairo. He was talking to the part of himself that had already decided. He should leave. He knew that. There was nothing here that belonged to him. No mission, no orders, no obligation. Just a broken plane, a carved message, and a feeling he didn't trust. That should have been enough. It had been enough before. Once. And he had walked away. Rowan's jaw tightened. "Not again," he murmured. Cairo shifted slightly at the tone, his ears angling toward Rowan, but he didn't interrupt. The dog didn't question decisions. He followed them. That was the problem. Rowan stood again. "Let's take a look around," he said, voice steady now. Not the plane. Not yet. The area. He needed context. They moved along the ridge, parallel to the cliff, but staying within the cover of trees. Rowan scanned the ground, the terrain, the subtle ways the environment changed when something, or someone, interacted with it repeatedly. That's when he saw it. Not a footprint. A trail. Faint. Almost invisible. But there. The moss had been pressed down in a narrow line, not in patches like random movement, but consistently, step after step, always following the same path. It led away from the cliff, deeper into the forest. Cairo noticed it at the same time, his head lifted, body aligning slightly with the direction. No hesitation. This time, he followed. Rowan fell in beside him. The path wasn't obvious enough for anyone unfamiliar with tracking, but it was there. Whoever had used it had done so carefully, consistently, over time. Not rushing, not hiding completely, just repeating. That told Rowan something important. This wasn't a one-time visit. Someone had been coming back. They followed the trail for several minutes before the forest shifted again. The trees opened into a narrow clearing. Not natural. Cleared. The ground here was uneven. Patches of dirt breaking through moss. Small rocks pushed aside. At the far edge stood a structure barely visible at first glance. A small ranger outpost, weathered and quiet, blending into the forest as if it had learned to stay unnoticed. Rowan slowed. Cairo did not. The dog moved forward, steady but cautious. That alone told Rowan something else. This place wasn't wrong in the same way the plane was, different, not safe, but not the same. Rowan stepped into the clearing. The outpost was older, wood darkened by years of weather, the roof slightly sagging on one side. A small antenna stood near it, bent but not broken. The windows were intact, though one carried a thin crack along the edge. Not abandoned, not entirely. Rowan's eyes narrowed slightly. Someone used this. Before he could say anything, the door opened. Rowan froze. Cairo stopped. A woman stepped out. She moved with quiet control, not startled, not aggressive, just aware. She was in her mid-30s, maybe a little older, with a lean, athletic build shaped by years outdoors rather than any deliberate training. Her hair was chestnut brown, pulled back into a loose tie at the nape of her neck, a few strands escaping to frame a face that had seen more sun than rest. Her eyes were sharp, observant, the kind that didn't miss small things. She wore a moss-green Ranger parka, worn at the cuffs, layered over a gray sweater. Dark outdoor pants and waterproof boots completed the look. A small pack rested against her back, light but functional. Maps, tools, things that mattered out here. She didn't reach for a weapon, but she didn't relax either. "Elena Voss," she said. Not a question, a statement. Her voice was calm, controlled, but edged with something that had been built over time. Not fear, not hostility, but caution learned the hard way. Rowan didn't move. Rowan Hale. She nodded once, eyes flicking briefly to Cairo. That's when something shifted. Cairo stepped forward slightly. Not aggressively, not defensively, but not welcoming either. He stopped a few feet from her, standing still, watching, reading. Elena noticed. Her expression changed. Just slightly. Not fear. Recognition. "You're not local," she said, her gaze returning to Rowan. "No. You shouldn't be here." Rowan let that sit. Neither should that plane. Silence followed. Elena didn't answer immediately. Instead, she studied him, his posture, his clothing, the way he held himself. Her eyes lingered on the field jacket, the boots, the watch. She understood something. Not everything, but enough. "You've seen it," she said. Rowan nodded once. Cairo didn't move. Elena's gaze returned to the dog. "He didn't like it." It wasn't a question. Rowan's mouth twitched slightly. "No." Elena exhaled slowly. "Good," she said. That word landed heavier than it should have. Rowan frowned slightly. "Good?" She nodded, stepping a little closer, though still keeping distance. "If he liked it, I'd be more worried." Rowan studied her more carefully now. "You've been out here a while." Elena gave a faint, humorless smile. "Long enough." She glanced past him, toward the direction of the cliff, then back. "Long enough to know that place doesn't belong." Cairo shifted slightly, still watching her, still not fully at ease. Rowan noticed. The dog wasn't tense, but he wasn't relaxed either. He had categorized her. Not a threat, but not safe. Something else. Rowan felt the same. "Who else knows about it?" he asked. Elena's expression tightened. "No one who matters?" That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting right now. There was no anger in her tone. Just boundaries, earned ones. Rowan nodded slowly. "All right." Silence stretched again. Wind moved through the clearing, brushing against the structure behind her. Elena broke it. 12 years ago, she said quietly, a research team came out here. Rowan's focus sharpened. They weren't supposed to be this far north, not officially, but they got clearance for something experimental. Environmental monitoring, they said. She shook her head slightly. That's what the paperwork said. Rowan didn't interrupt. He knew better. Elena's eyes drifted, just for a second. Not to the trees, not to the sky, somewhere inward. They didn't leave. That hung in the air, heavy. Rowan felt it settle. How many? He asked. 6. And you? She met his gaze again. I wasn't part of the team. A pause. Then, my brother was. Elena's voice didn't break. It didn't need to. His name was Noah, she said, the moment the name left her mouth. Cairo turned, sharp, immediate. His head snapped toward the direction of the cliff, toward the plain, his entire body aligned with it, not in alert, not in fear, in recognition. Rowan felt it, not in logic, in instinct, like something invisible had just connected two points that shouldn't have known each other existed. Elena saw it too. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "That's not normal," she said. Rowan didn't answer, because it wasn't. Cairo stood there, completely still, staring through the trees as if distance didn't matter, as if he could see something beyond sight. Then, just as quickly, he relaxed, turned back, sat, like nothing had happened. But something had. Rowan felt it settle deep in his chest. Elena watched the dog for another second before speaking again. "He was 10, she said quietly. Rowan looked at her. "Your brother?" She nodded. "He wasn't supposed to be out here, not with them. But he went anyway." Her jaw tightened slightly. "They said it was safe." Rowan said nothing. There was nothing to say. Elena exhaled slowly. When the team disappeared, they shut everything down. Official reports, searches, statements. She looked back toward the trees. Then they stopped looking. Rowan understood that too well. "And you didn't," he said. It wasn't a question. Elena shook her head. "No." Cairo remained still, listening. Rowan studied her. "You've been watching that place?" "Yes." "For 12 years?" "Yes." "Why?" Elena's eyes met his. Because she hadn't stopped believing. "Because something out there doesn't add up," she said. "And because one day—" She paused, just for a moment. "I thought I heard something." Rowan felt a chill move through him. Not fear. Recognition again. Too many things in this place were starting to feel familiar. He looked back toward the direction of the plane. Then at Cairo. Then at Elena. This wasn't just a discovery anymore. This was something else. A story that had been left unfinished. A place someone had walked away from. Or been taken from. Rowan exhaled slowly. "This isn't a coincidence," he said. Elena didn't disagree. "No," she said quietly. "It isn't." The forest remained bright, calm, unchanged. But Rowan Hale knew better now. He hadn't just found something. He had walked into something that had been waiting. Night did not fall hard in the northern forest. It thinned the world instead. The last of the daylight lingered in the high branches, a pale silver wash caught in pine needles and drifting mist. The ground darkened first, then the trunks, then the narrow spaces between them, until the whole forest seemed suspended between evening and something older. Even after sunset, the woods still held a dim, ghost-like brightness, as if the land refused to go completely blind. Rowan waited until Elena's outpost went quiet. He had left with few words and less honesty. He told her he needed air, that he wanted to think alone, which was not entirely false. But the truth sat underneath it like a blade under cloth. He was going back to the plain, and he was going back without Cairo. That decision followed him through the trees like a second shadow. He knew better. He knew the dog's instincts had been more reliable than his own for years. He knew Cairo did not resist places without reason. He knew every bad choice in his life had started with the same small lie men like him told themselves. "I'll just take a look." And still, he went. Because there was a sentence buried in metal behind him, and a 10-year-old boy buried in silence somewhere ahead of him. Because Elena's face had changed when she said her brother's name. And Rowan had seen that look before in mirrors, hospital corridors, and folded flags. The look of someone still holding a door open long after the house had burned down. Because some part of him believed that if he went back alone, whatever this place was might show him more. The forest was colder now. The air smelled of wet bark and rock, and the faint mineral breath of the cliff. Rowan moved quietly, boots sinking into moss, one hand near the pocket knife clipped inside his jacket. His old military watch caught a sliver of gray light every time he lifted his wrist. Time kept moving. It always did. That had never stopped it from feeling trapped. When he reached the cliff, the plane waited exactly where he had left it. Dark, still, impossible. At night it looked less like wreckage and more like an old animal that had gone to ground and never fully died. The fuselage held the last of the sky in dull reflections. The broken edge of one wing cut into the mist. Somewhere below, water moved against stone in a patient, indifferent rhythm. Rowan stood for a moment and listened. No voices, no footsteps, no wind strong enough to explain the unease in his chest. He climbed toward the opening in the aircraft and slipped inside. The air in the plane was colder than outside, carrying the smell of old insulation, oxidized metal, and something else, faint, synthetic, wrong. Not fresh enough to be immediate, but recent enough to disturb memory. The kind of scent left by equipment, gloves, clean solvents, battery heat. He let his eyes adjust. The darkness inside was not complete. Soft moonlight leaked through cracks in the cockpit glass, and the gaps where paneling had once been. It washed the interior in a dim blue-gray sheen, enough to reveal shapes but not soften them. Everything looked harder in that light, more deliberate. Rowan moved past the exposed ribs of the fuselage and toward the place where he had seen the newer wiring. Up close, the cables bothered him more. They did not belong to the era of the aircraft. Their insulation was too intact, their colors too modern, their routing too intentional. Someone had fed them through the body of the plane carefully, almost respectfully, as if trying not to wake the older bones around them. He crouched and traced one line with his fingertips. It led into a recessed cavity near the midsection. There, half hidden behind a bent section of structural support, sat a small device about the size of a paperback. Matte black. No rust, no manufacturer label visible in the low light. It had not been there when aircraft and forest first became one. It looked newer than everything around it, and somehow that made it feel more intrusive than a weapon would have. Rowan stared at it. Then, with the kind of resignation men reserve for mistakes they are already halfway through making, he reached for it. The device was cold and lighter than expected. A faint indicator light, barely visible, blinked once. Red, then dark. Not dead, sleeping. He turned it in his hand. One side bore a recessed switch. Another held a small audio jack and a narrow speaker grill. "Of course," he muttered. His voice sounded wrong inside the fuselage, too small. The plane swallowed it without echo. He should have taken the device outside. He should have waited until morning. He should have brought Elena, or Cairo, or both. Instead, Rowan pressed the switch. For one long second, nothing happened. Then the speaker crackled. Static filled the narrow interior, soft at first, then harsher, like sand dragged across glass. Rowan instinctively tensed, every muscle tightening under the olive jacket. He almost shut it off. Then a voice emerged, a woman's voice, thin with interference, strained with fear, but unmistakably human. "If you find this..." The recording broke apart in a wash of static. Rowan held perfectly still, head bent toward the device as if listening harder could rebuild what time had ruined. "Don't let them take her." The words came fragmented, some swallowed, some torn, but enough reached him cleanly to make his throat tighten. "Don't let them take her." Rowan frowned. Her, not him, not me, her. He replayed the moment in his head, even as the recording dissolved again into hiss and broken frequency. The woman said something else. Maybe a name, maybe a plea. But the audio warped into metallic distortion before he could catch it. Then silence. The device went dark. Rowan stayed crouched, staring at it as though it might decide to speak again if he waited with enough discipline. A woman? A child? A girl? Someone being taken. His mind began doing what it always did under pressure. Building possibilities, discarding weak ones, arranging fragments into patterns. Research team. Hidden plane. New wiring. Carved warning. Elena's missing brother. A recorded plea about a girl. None of it fit. Not yet. That bothered him worse than fear. He toggled the switch again. Nothing. He turned it over. Checked for removable storage, secondary controls, a battery panel, any indication of how old it might be. His hands remained steady, but only because they had been trained to betray him last. Inside, something darker had begun to stir. The old hunger to push forward, take control, force clarity out of chaos. That hunger had saved lives once. It had also cost them. Then Rowan heard claws on metal behind him. He spun. Cairo stood in the opening of the aircraft. Silent, still. The black and tan shepherd had come through the forest without a sound. His harness dark against the pale night, his deep eyes reflecting almost no light at all. But he was not looking at Rowan. Not at the device, not at the doorway. He was staring deeper into the plane, past Rowan, into the shadows beyond the exposed ribs and stripped panels. And for one impossible second, Rowan felt it too. That sharp, unnatural sensation that something inside the aircraft had just gone still because it knew it had been noticed. Cairo did not step in. He did not growl. He only looked, as if something in the darkness had looked back. The feeling broke as quickly as it came. Rowan breathed again, though he had not realized he'd stopped. Cairo finally shifted his gaze toward him, but there was no warmth in it, no relief. Only that disciplined, unreadable focus working dogs carried when instinct outran explanation. "You weren't supposed to come," Rowan said quietly. Cairo blinked once. A judgment, not an apology. The dog remained at the threshold. That detail landed harder than Rowan wanted it to. Cairo had followed him here through the night, tracked him silently through cold woods, found him without being called, and still refused to cross into the body of the plane. Rowan rose slowly, the device still in one hand. "Yeah," he murmured. "I know." He slipped the recorder into his jacket pocket and took one cautious step back. Cairo did not retreat, but neither did he advance. His attention stayed fixed on the interior, ears angled forward, body taut in a way Rowan had learned to respect. Not attack readiness, witness readiness. That was worse. Rowan turned once, scanning the shadowed interior with new eyes. The plane looked the same as it had moments ago. Bent metal, cut paneling, narrow aisle, blue-gray moonlight. But the emotional shape of the place had changed. Before, it had felt abandoned by people. Now it felt occupied by consequence. He moved toward the doorway. Only when he came within arm's reach did Cairo step aside to let him pass. Outside, the night air hit Rowan like cold water. He had not realized how tight the aircraft had felt around him until the forest opened again. He crouched near the dog. Cairo's coat smelled of pine, damp earth, and the clean working heat of a body built for endurance. Up close, Rowan could see the tiny changes in the shepherd's expression. The slightly narrowed eyes, the tension at the corners of the mouth, the refusal to look away from the plane for more than a second. "You heard it too," Rowan said. Cairo's ears twitched. Not confirmation, not denial, just awareness. Rowan sat back on his heels and looked at the plane hanging over the cliff. The forest around them remained softly lit, almost gentle. Far below, water kept moving in the dark. Somewhere behind them, Elena was likely still awake in that outpost, holding 12 years of grief together with routine and refusal. A woman's voice echoed through Rowan's mind. "Don't let them take her." The pronoun bothered him. So did the fear in it. People did not record messages like that because they were confused. They recorded them because time had run out. He should tell Elena immediately. He knew that. Instead, he sat there one moment too long, staring at the aircraft as if it might explain itself if he showed it enough patience. That was the third mistake. Not returning alone. Not activating the device. Staying with the information instead of releasing it. Because the longer Rowan held the message in silence, the more it began to belong to him. Not as evidence. As burden. Cairo finally looked at him. In the dimness, the dog's eyes seemed older than the night itself. Rowan nodded once, to the dog, to the cliff, to whatever debt had just shifted shape inside him. "We're going back," he said. This time, Cairo moved first. He led the way into the trees without hurry, never once glancing behind them, as if he already knew the plane would still be there when they returned, waiting, patient, unfinished. Rowan followed, one hand resting over the device in his jacket pocket. The forest seemed brighter on the way back. Not safer, just clearer. And behind them, on the cliff edge, the old aircraft sat in its impossible place under a pale northern sky, holding its secrets the way wounded people did. Too tightly, too long, until the truth began leaking out in fragments. Morning returned like nothing had happened. Light filtered through the pines in soft gold, brushing the forest floor with the same quiet beauty as the day before. The air was clean, cool, almost gentle. Too gentle for what Rowan now carried in his pocket. The device felt heavier than it should have. Not in weight, in meaning. Rowan stood just outside Elena's outpost, watching the thin smoke curl from a small vent near the roof. Cairo sat beside him, posture steady, eyes alert but not tense. The dog had returned to his usual discipline, but something underneath had shifted. Rowan could feel it. Not fear, not certainty, something unsettled. He knocked once. The door opened almost immediately. Elena Voss stood there, already awake, already dressed. Her moss green Ranger parka was zipped halfway, her hair loosely tied back, strands catching the light. There was no surprise in her face. She had expected him. "You went back," she said. Not a question. Rowan didn't deny it. "Yes." Her jaw tightened slightly, but she stepped aside. "Come in." The interior of the outpost was small but efficient. Maps lined one wall, layered over each other in careful overlap. A folding table held scattered notes, a rugged laptop, and 2 GPS units that looked older than they should have been. A portable radio sat near the window, silent but powered. Everything in the room suggested one thing. She had been working this problem for a long time. Rowan stepped in. Cairo followed, this time without hesitation. That mattered. Elena noticed. Her eyes flicked briefly to the dog, then back to Rowan. "What did you find?" Rowan reached into his jacket and placed the device on the table. Elena leaned in, studying it without touching. "That's not from the plane," she said immediately. "No." Her eyes narrowed. "Where?" "Inside." That changed something. Elena straightened slowly, her expression tightening not with fear, but with confirmation. "I knew it," she murmured. Rowan didn't respond. He didn't need to. She picked up the device carefully, turning it in her hands, her fingers moving with the familiarity of someone who had handled equipment like this before. "Military-grade casing," she said. "Older model, but not that old. 10, maybe 12 years. That number landed. Rowan saw it in her eyes. Same timeline. She swallowed once. "You activated it?" "Yes." "And?" Rowan hesitated. Not because he didn't want to tell her, because saying it out loud made it real. "A recording," he said finally. "A woman. Fragmented. She said, 'If you find this, don't let them take her.'" Elena went still. Completely still. The forest outside seemed to fade again, replaced by something quieter and heavier. "Her," she repeated softly. Rowan nodded. Elena turned away, pacing once across the small room, her boots silent against the worn wooden floor. "That doesn't match the reports," she said. "What reports?" "They said it was a closed research team. Environmental monitoring, 6 adults. No mention of anyone else." Rowan watched her. "You believe that?" She didn't answer right away. Then, "No." Cairo shifted slightly. Not tense, but attentive. Elena noticed again. She crouched slightly, bringing herself closer to the dog's level, but not reaching out, not forcing contact. "You don't trust easily, do you?" she said quietly. Cairo didn't move, didn't soften, didn't retreat. He simply watched her, reading. Then he looked away, not rejecting her, not accepting her, understanding something. Elena exhaled slowly. "Fair enough?" She stood again, turning back to the table. "There's more," she said. Rowan raised an eyebrow. Elena reached for one of the GPS units and powered it on. The screen flickered, then stabilized. Coordinates appeared. She set it down between them. "Watch." She tapped a point on the map. The cursor jumped. Not smoothly, not correctly. It shifted slightly off target, then corrected, then shifted again. Rowan frowned. "That's not normal drift." "No," Elena said. "It's not." She grabbed the second unit. Same coordinates, different result. Slightly off, not random, consistent. Rowan's eyes narrowed. "Magnetic interference?" "Partially," she said, "but not just that." She pointed toward the direction of the cliff. "There's a line out there." Rowan stilled. "A boundary," Elena nodded. "Not visible, but real." Cairo's ears angled forward. Rowan felt it. The pattern forming. "Show me." They moved through the forest again. Daylight made everything clearer, but not simpler. The trail Elena led them along was different from the one Rowan had followed before. Narrower, less used, more deliberate in its avoidance of open ground. She walked ahead, her posture relaxed but precise, stepping exactly where she needed to, not wasting movement. Rowan followed. Cairo moved between them, not leading, not trailing, balancing. After several minutes, Elena slowed. "Here," she said. Rowan looked around. Nothing, just trees, moss, light. But Cairo stopped. That was enough. The dog stood at the edge of something Rowan couldn't see. His body leaned forward slightly, then paused. He lifted one paw, lowered it, lifted it again, then stepped forward, and immediately stepped back. Rowan's breath slowed. "That's new," he murmured. Elena nodded. "That's what I've been seeing." She held up the GPS. The screen flickered. Coordinates shifted. Not wildly, just enough to be wrong. Rowan pulled out his watch. The second hand ticked steadily, then skipped. Just once, then continued. Subtle, but real. "Elena," he said quietly. "I know." Cairo tried again. Step forward, pause, step back. For the first time since Rowan had known him, the dog hesitated. Not from fear, from uncertainty. That unsettled Rowan more than anything. He stepped forward, crossing the invisible line. Nothing dramatic happened. No sound, no light. Just a shift. The air felt denser, not heavier, more structured, as if something unseen had layers. Cairo stood behind him, frozen. Then he moved, crossing after Rowan, not confidently, but because Rowan had. On the other side, the forest changed, not visually, not at first, but in detail. The silence was tighter, the light slightly distorted. Sound carried differently, muted in some directions, sharper in others. Elena moved ahead. "Stay close," she said. They followed the terrain downward, and then the trees opened. A structure emerged. Not natural, not subtle. A facility, small but unmistakably man-made. Concrete foundations, partially reclaimed by moss. Steel framework rusted, but intact. A collapsed antenna tower leaning against one side like a broken limb. An old research station. Rowan stopped. This wasn't in any report. "No," Elena said. It wasn't. Cairo moved forward slowly, carefully. His nose worked the air, his body tense, not from immediate danger, but from the weight of something that didn't belong to the present. They entered. Inside, the air was colder, drier, less touched by the forest. Dust layered the surfaces, but not evenly. Some areas had been disturbed. Rowan scanned the room, tables, equipment, old monitors, and papers. Elena moved to a desk. Her hands trembled, just slightly, as she sorted through the remains. Files, documents. Most were damaged, faded, but some still readable. Rowan stepped beside her. "What is it?" Elena didn't answer immediately. Then she turned one page toward him, a heading, partially scratched out. Below it, notes, diagrams, words. "Cognitive link trials," Rowan read. Elena swallowed. "Keep going." He did. "Cross-species neural resonance, signal amplification, behavioral synchronization." He stopped. That didn't belong in environmental research. "What were they doing?" he asked. Elena shook her head slowly. "Not what they said they were." Rowan flipped another page, a list of subjects, names, most redacted, blacked out, except one. Clear, untouched. Noah Voss. Elena's breath caught. She reached out, fingers hovering just above the page, not touching. "That's him," she whispered. Rowan looked at her, then at the page, then at Cairo. The dog had stopped moving. Standing near a piece of old equipment, a small platform, wires, metal plates, inactive. Cairo stepped onto it and froze, not tense, not alert, still, completely still. His breathing slowed, his eyes softened, not focused outward, focused inward. as if, for a brief moment, he wasn't just standing there, he was remembering something, a feeling, a signal, a connection that should not have existed. Rowan stepped toward him. "Cairo?" No response. Elena whispered, barely audible, "That's not training." Rowan felt it. Deep, unsettling, not fear. Something else. A realization forming too fast. If this place had been testing something, if it had been trying to connect, then Cairo. Rowan stopped that thought. Not yet. Cairo stepped off the platform. The moment passed. The forest sounds returned faintly through the broken structure. The light shifted. Normal again. But nothing was normal. Rowan looked at Elena. This wasn't just research. She nodded slowly. No. He looked back at the name, then at Cairo, then at the broken machines around them. This was something else. Elena's voice was quiet. Yes. Rowan exhaled slowly. They had crossed a line, not just in the forest, in understanding, and whatever had been built here hadn't stayed buried. Rowan didn't speak for a long time. The name on the page still hung between them, like something fragile and sharp at the same time. Noah Voss. Elena stood frozen beside the desk, her fingers hovering just above the paper, as if touching it might erase it, or confirm something she wasn't ready to survive. Her breathing had changed, shallow and controlled. The kind of breath people take when they are trying to hold themselves together by force alone. Cairo had already stepped off the platform. Whatever had held him there, whatever invisible alignment had passed through him, was gone. He stood near Rowan now, posture steady again, but his eyes carried something new, not confusion, recognition. Rowan felt it settle into place, not as a conclusion, as a direction. He looked back at the equipment, the stripped panels, the wiring, the metal frame that once held purpose, and then at Cairo. You weren't just trained, Rowan said quietly. Elena turned toward him, her eyes still glassed with something too close to breaking. What? Rowan didn't look at her. He kept his gaze on the dog. You've seen things like this before, he continued. Not a question. Cairo didn't react. But he didn't deny it either. That was enough. Rowan exhaled slowly, the pieces aligning in his mind. Not here, he said. Not this place. But something like it. Elena frowned. You're saying your dog was part of this? Rowan shook his head. Not this program. He tapped lightly against the metal edge of the table. But something close. He crouched slightly beside Cairo, resting one hand against the dog's shoulder. The contact was grounding, for both of them. Military trials, Rowan said. Experimental work, not public, never was. Elena's expression shifted, from grief to focus. What kind of trials? Rowan hesitated, not because he didn't know, because he did. Enhancement, he said finally. Not physical, not strength, not speed. He looked at Cairo. Perception. The word hung in the air. Elena's eyes flicked between Rowan and the dog. What does that mean? It means, Rowan said, voice steady but lower now. He doesn't just see what's there. He paused. He feels patterns. Elena swallowed. Patterns of what? Rowan didn't answer immediately because he wasn't sure how to explain something that had never been meant to be explained. Stress, he said. Intent. Disruption. The things that don't match the environment. He glanced around the room. Places like this. Elena looked back at the equipment, the wires, the files, the name, her brother. Her shoulders dropped slightly, not in surrender, but in realization. "They were trying to do the same thing," she whispered. Rowan nodded once. "Looks like it." Silence followed, heavier now, more defined, because this wasn't just a mystery anymore. It was a system, a purpose, and someone had used it. Elena turned away, pacing once across the room, her movements tighter now, less controlled. "They said it was environmental monitoring," she said, her voice sharper. "Data collection, weather patterns, signal analysis." Rowan didn't interrupt. "They lied?" The word landed with finality. "Yes," Rowan said. Elena stopped, her back to him. "They took him," she said. Not asked, not wondered, declared. "They took him and put him in this." Her hand came up, pressing briefly against her forehead, as if trying to push the thought away physically. "They didn't lose him," she continued. "They used him." Rowan didn't move, didn't try to soften it, because she was right. Cairo shifted, then moved. Slowly, deliberately, he walked toward Elena. No hesitation, no caution. The dog stopped beside her and gently pressed his head against her hand. Not nudging, not demanding, offering. Elena froze. For a moment she didn't react. Then her fingers moved, almost without permission. They rested against Cairo's head, sliding into the thick fur at his neck. Her breath broke, just slightly, but enough. "I've been looking for him for 12 years, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Cairo didn't move. Rowan watched. There were no words for this, no explanation, just presence. And sometimes, that was enough to hold something together when everything else failed. The sound came without warning, a faint click from behind them. Rowan's head snapped up. Cairo lifted his head immediately, stepping away from Elena, his body shifting into alert readiness. The room felt different, not louder, sharper. Rowan turned. The device, the one he had brought, it had activated. On its own. The small screen flickered. Not a full display, just enough light to break the darkness. "Elena," Rowan said quietly. She wiped her eyes quickly, turning. "I didn't touch it." "I know." They moved closer. Cairo stayed just behind Rowan now, close enough to react instantly, far enough to keep his view of the room clear. The device emitted a low hum. Then, a screen. Not large, not clear, but visible. Grainy, distorted. A video. A child, small, thin, standing in a metal room. The walls were smooth, sterile, reflective in a way that made the space feel colder than it should have been. Wires ran along the edges. Equipment blinked faintly in the background. The child turned slightly. A boy, dark hair, narrow shoulders, eyes too aware for his age. Elena's breath caught. "Noah," she whispered. The image flickered. A dog stepped into frame. Not Cairo, but similar, black and tan, lean, disciplined. The dog moved to the boy's side, sat, still, waiting. Rowan felt something tighten in his chest. The video stuttered, distorted. The boy looked at something off-screen. Then, for a split second, Rowan thought he saw movement behind him, not in the video, in the reflection of the metal wall. He turned sharply. Nothing. Just the broken interior of the station, the flicker of light, his own shadow. He exhaled slowly. Not real, just the light, just the angle, just his mind filling gaps where it didn't have enough information. He turned back. The video continued. The boy reached out, touched the dog's head. The dog didn't move, didn't react, just existed, connected. The image warped again. Audio tried to break through, then failed. Static, then darkness. The device shut off. Cairo turned, fast, sharp, toward the forest. Not the station, not the device, the trees. His body stiffened, ears forward, eyes locked. There was nothing there, no movement, no sound. And yet, for the first time, Rowan felt it too. Not a shape, not a presence, but a certainty. They were no longer alone. Elena followed his gaze. "What is it?" she whispered. Rowan didn't answer, because he didn't have one. Cairo took one step forward, then stopped, not advancing, not retreating, holding the line. Rowan stepped beside him. The forest looked the same, bright, quiet, unchanged. But the silence had shifted. It felt occupied, not by something visible, but by attention. Elena's voice was tighter now. "Rowan." He didn't look at her. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I feel it." Cairo didn't bark, didn't growl. He simply stood there, watching, waiting. Rowan exhaled slowly. "We're not done here," he said. Elena didn't argue. She didn't need to. The truth had already changed shape. This wasn't about finding out what happened anymore. It was about understanding what was still happening. Rowan looked down at Cairo. The dog met his gaze, steady, focused, ready. Rowan nodded once. "All right." He looked back toward the trees, toward the unseen. "We're not leaving yet." The forest remained quiet, but it was no longer empty. The forest did not warn them. That was the cruelest part. Morning came clean and bright again, light spilling through the trees in soft gold, brushing over the broken station as if it were just another forgotten structure swallowed by time. The air felt calm, still, almost kind. But the station was no longer quiet. Rowan felt it the moment he stepped back inside. Something had changed. Not visually, not immediately, but in the small details that mattered. A chair slightly shifted, a cable displaced. Dust disturbed in places it had settled the day before. Rowan's shoulders tightened beneath his olive jacket. "We're not the only ones coming back," he said. Elena stood near the desk, her eyes already scanning the room with a sharper edge now. The softness from the night before, whatever vulnerability had surfaced when she saw Noah, had retreated behind something colder, focused, controlled. "Someone's been here," she said. Not fear. Recognition. Rowan moved toward the central table where the files had been, or where they should have been. Several pages were missing, not torn, removed, cleanly. He crouched, examining the edges. "Not random," he muttered. "They took what they needed." Elena's jaw tightened. "They know we found it." Cairo moved past them, not toward the door, not toward the broken equipment, toward the far wall. The dog stopped there, head lowered slightly, nose hovering just above the metal surface where a panel met the floor. He didn't signal, didn't warn. He simply focused. Rowan followed. The panel looked like part of the original structure, flat, dull, unremarkable. Except it wasn't sealed. Not fully. A thin gap ran along one edge. Rowan crouched beside it. "Help me," he said. Elena stepped in. Together they pried the panel loose. It resisted at first, old metal, stubborn and quiet, but then gave way with a low, reluctant sound. Behind it, a compartment, hidden, protected, and inside, a box. It was smaller than Rowan expected. Hard casing, waterproof. Military grade by the look of it, though older. The edges were worn, but not from neglect. From handling. Frequent handling. Elena's breath caught. "This is it," she whispered. Rowan didn't answer. He didn't trust words in moments like this. He reached forward and lifted the box carefully. No traps, no wires, just weight, real. He set it down on the table. Cairo stood nearby, not tense, not alert, just present. That was new. Rowan noticed. Cairo wasn't leading anymore, wasn't guiding, wasn't warning. He was simply staying, and somehow, that mattered more than anything the dog had done before. Rowan opened the box. Inside, not chaos, not fragments, order, deliberate, files, storage drives, paper records sealed in plastic, and a collar, small, worn, carefully placed at the top. Rowan reached for it. The leather was thin with age, cracked along the edges. A small metal tag hung from it, catching the morning light in a dull reflection. He turned it over. One letter. Clear. N. Elena broke. Not loudly, not dramatically. Her knees gave slightly and she caught herself against the edge of the table, her breath shaking as something inside her finally lost its grip. "That's his," she said. Her voice wasn't a whisper. It wasn't strong either. It was something in between. Truth. Rowan held the collar for a moment longer, then set it down gently. There was no body, no remains, no final confirmation, just evidence. And that was worse. Because evidence didn't end anything. It just proved that something had happened. Elena pressed her hands against her face, shoulders shaking now, quietly, as if she didn't want the forest to hear. "They took him," she said. Rowan didn't answer, because he didn't know if that was the worst part, or if the worst part was that no one had come back for him. The station lights flickered, not from power, from interference. A low hum filled the air again, faint, unstable, like something trying to reconnect. Cairo's head snapped up, not toward the device, not toward the door, toward the forest, his body stilled, completely. Then, for the first time since Rowan had known him, Cairo didn't react with certainty. He hesitated. Rowan felt it immediately. That shift. Cairo didn't hesitate, not like that. Not ever. "What is it?" Elena asked, her voice still unsteady. Rowan didn't answer, because he didn't know, and that was worse. Cairo took a step toward the door, stopped, looked back. Not for permission, for alignment. Rowan stood slowly. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I feel it too." Elena wiped her face quickly, forcing control back into her voice. "Feel what?" Rowan looked at her. "Pressure." That was the closest word he had. Not physical, not visible, but real. Like the air had shifted around them. Like something had closed in just enough to be noticed. Cairo moved again, toward the door. This time he didn't stop. Rowan followed. Elena hesitated. Then came after them. They stepped outside. The forest looked the same. Bright, still, peaceful, and yet wrong. Not visually, not obviously, but in the way silence held itself. Too tight, too aware. Rowan scanned the tree line. Nothing, no movement, no sound. But the feeling remained. Cairo stood at the edge of the clearing, not advancing, not retreating, holding position. Rowan stepped beside him. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Rowan exhaled slowly. "We finished this," he said. Elena looked at him. "You think there's more?" Rowan shook his head. "No." He looked back toward the station. "I think this is it." That landed differently. He wasn't saying there was nothing left to find. He was saying this was the truth. And truth didn't always come with closure. They went back inside. Rowan gathered the files, the drives, the evidence, everything that remained. He didn't rush, didn't skip anything. This time he wasn't late. Elena stood beside him, not crying now, not breaking, just present, holding what she could. Cairo lay down near the door, not watching, not guarding, just staying. That was enough. When they stepped out of the station for the last time, the forest felt different again. Not safer, not lighter, but honest. Rowan stood at the edge of the clearing, the box secured in his pack. Elena stood beside him, her eyes fixed somewhere deeper into the trees, where memory and reality overlapped. "He's gone," she said. Rowan didn't answer immediately. Then, yes. No comfort, no lie, just truth. Elena nodded slowly. "I needed to know." Rowan understood that, more than he wanted to. He looked out at the forest, no gunfire, no orders, no chaos, just light and silence, and the kind of space where a man could finally see what he had been carrying without distraction. "I've been late before," Rowan said quietly. Elena didn't look at him. She didn't need to. "And this time?" she asked. Rowan exhaled slowly. "I still was." That truth didn't break him. It didn't fix anything either. But it stayed, and that mattered. He adjusted the strap of his pack. "Let's get this out of here," he said. Elena nodded. Cairo stood. Not leading, not following, just walking with him. They left the station behind. The forest closed around them again, light filtering through the trees, soft and endless. No sign remained of what had happened. No mark, no warning, just memory. Rowan walked in silence. Cairo beside him, steady, present, unmoving in the way that mattered. Not just a dog, not just a partner, something else. Something that stayed when everything else left. And for the first time in a long time, Rowan didn't walk away. Sometimes, a miracle doesn't arrive as something loud or undeniable. It doesn't always look like a life saved at the last second, or a perfect ending where everything is restored. Sometimes a miracle is quieter. It is the moment you choose not to walk away. The moment you face a truth that hurts, but still matters. The moment you stay, even when you know you were too late. In a world that often measures everything by winning or losing, this story reminds us of something deeper. Not every battle is meant to be won, but every truth is meant to be seen. And sometimes, God doesn't change the outcome. He changes the heart that walks through it. Maybe you've had moments like that in your own life. A delay that didn't make sense at the time. A feeling you couldn't explain. A quiet voice inside telling you to slow down, to stay, to care, even when it was hard. Those moments may not look like miracles, but they carry something greater. Guidance, protection, and a kind of love that doesn't leave when things get difficult. If this story meant something to you, take a moment to share it with someone who might need it today. Leave a comment and tell us, have you ever experienced a moment where you felt God was guiding you, even when you didn't understand why? And if you want more stories about loyalty, second chances, and the quiet strength that carries us through the hardest moments, subscribe to the channel and stay with us for the next chapter. May God bless you and your family. May He protect your path, steady your heart, and place loyal love beside you, especially in the moments when you need it most.